marketers, designers, and developers, and welcome to Accessibility is Personalization. Today, we're going to look at 3 email mistakes that are still breaking UX in 2026. I'm Lauren Castady, and I'm excited to be back at Litmus Live. I've spent the past decade in email marketing and design, partnering with brands to drive performance and build smarter, more scalable systems. Today, I work as an independent consultant, helping teams turn accessibility into competitive advantage. And if you want to keep the conversation going after today, you can scan that code next to my photo and let's connect. Now I'll pass it over to Tyler.
Hi everyone, I'm Tyler. I had to try really hard not to parrot Lauren's, layout here just because we have so much in common with our careers, but a lot of the same stuff going on. But 10 years in marketing and design, partner with brands. One of my big passions is, design systems and just looking at ways that designers can work more efficiently, but also do it in an accessible way. And I've been an accessibility advocate since 2016. So yeah, and same, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn if you all want to talk about anything more. But other than that, let's dive in.
Awesome. Yeah, we're so excited to be working on this together. And today we're talking about accessibility not as a limitation, but as a personalization at scale. So, because too often accessibility is framed as designing for someone, if that's an edge case or a small segment. But the truth is, it's one of the largest audiences we design for. So 1 in 6 people worldwide have disability, and that's over a billion people. And here's the email reality check. If you design email long enough, you learn pretty quick that you're not designing for edge cases, you're designing for real life because 100% of people experience situational or temporary impairments. That's that Lois Griffin kind of tired, zoned out, staring at the phone, and nothing is landing because that's real life. We're in bright sunlight, we're one hand with a coffee, one hand scrolling. We're at the end of the day, we're tired and we're aging, and there's just too many messages, and it could be overwhelming. So, accessibility is really about reality of the moment when you look at an email and you're like thinking, nope, not right now. And that's not a motivation problem, that's an accessibility problem. And when we design to remove that friction, we're lowering the bar and we're making email work better for everyone. So when someone looks at an email and thinks, nope, not right now, that moment doesn't vanish. It shows up in our metrics. Because email, we obsess over clicks and conversions, but accessibility is the silent blocker before any of them even matter. And that's why 16.8 billion in global e-commerce is lost every year. Not because people don't buy or won't buy, it's because they can't. And here's the frustrating part. Most teams see this problem, but instead of fixing it, they hesitate because what stops accessibility isn't lack of data. I believe it's fear. So these fears are understandable, and they are exactly why accessibility gets postponed or avoided altogether. And here's the truth. Accessibility doesn't break brands, it doesn't slow teams or limit creativity. It removes friction so great ideas can actually perform. And accessibility isn't about lowering that bar, it's about removing friction. So less friction creates clearer hierarchy. Clearer hierarchy enables that faster scanning, and faster scanning drives better performance. And that's accessibility as personalization at scale. So strong brains aren't fragile, they're flexible. That's key, they're flexible. So, if accessibility is really about removing friction, the question is where are teams still getting stuck? And that's what we'll be unpacking today. The 3 accessibility mistakes are not treating accessibility as a priority, believing it weakens the brand, and assuming it's a big, expensive project instead of a practical design approach. Hey, Taylor, let's talk about that first mistake.
Wonderful. So let's talk about mistake number one, and that's accessibility often isn't being prioritized. It's treated like something that's extra, or maybe it's a checklist that's added to the end. And the problem with this is that when accessibility isn't considered early, the experience starts to break. Emails become harder to scan, harder to understand, or even harder to use for a lot of people. And that's for all those people that Lauren was just speaking of. This isn't like a fringe case. So it's good not to think about this as a finishing touch, but more as foundational. And that's a great foundation that we're setting for any good user experience that we want to create in the future. So what I want to do is reframe how we think about accessibility and share a way that we can get more people aligned around why this work really matters in the first place. And so if we think about if we think about the mistake is treating accessibility as optional, well, the solution isn't going to be to add more rules or more checklists. The solution is about reframing what accessibility actually is. And here's the shift. Accessibility is personalization. All of us are used to thinking about how we personalize things through data. So who someone is or what they've done or what they want. And all of that really matters, but there's one layer of personalization that often gets missed, and that's human variability. So this allows us to think about how people read, how they navigate things, how they process information, and how do they make those decisions in a real world condition.
Mhm.
So personalization only works if people can actually access the message. So data is going to tell us who someone is and what they want, and accessibility is going to tell us how they want to experience that content. So when you layer those together, accessibility stops feeling like a constraint, and then it starts becoming an additional signal that helps us to understand our users a little bit better. So we marketers, designers, creatives, we're all really good at creating personas. We know how to segment by interest, intent, goals, all of that. But personas usually stop at who someone is, not how they experience content. So when we add things like disabilities, assistive tech, real world constraints, the picture becomes a little bit clearer to us. And accessibility doesn't replace what we are already doing. Again, it just adds this additional layer that makes personalization more accurate. So let's take a look at what some of this actually looks like in practice. So calls to actions, that is one of my favorite examples of how accessibility actually improves personalization. So there's a lot of CTAs floating out there with really vague language, things like click here or read more. And the issue necessarily isn't the words that are being used there. It's that those CTAs, they don't communicate value or intent. And what we want are descriptive CTAs because those do that. So a good accessible call to action does three things. It tells people what's going to happen next. It centers the value. What are they going to get out of it? And it preserves autonomy. So people can decide how and whether or not they want to actually engage with these CTAs that are in front of them. When the CTAs do that, they're going to help people understand what will happen or what they'll get if they decide to interact with this CTA. So again, accessibility is going to remove barriers and personalization is going to give people a reason to cross those barriers. And when CTAs describe value instead of mechanics or like what I should do, everyone's gonna win. And here's another example. So we talk a lot about writing in plain language when we're marketing stuff, and that is super important. But I will say that hierarchy and the way that we style that text is going to do a lot of that heavy lifting. So clear typography reduces cognitive load. So what is this does is it helps key messages surface to it brings those things to the surface a lot faster and it supports different ways that people read and process information. So when people can understand content quickly, all of that work that you did with personalization, well, that's going to come to the forefront. And then personalization is actually going to work that way. So again, if people can't find the message, then they can't personalize it. So I'll wrap up and I'll ground everything in what I just talked about with some possible outcomes for this. So accessibility makes the message perceivable, hierarchy and plain language make it understandable, and personalization makes it relevant. So when these three things work together, the personalized experience actually works. So with this foundation in place, I'm going to hand it back to Lauren, and she's going to walk us through mistake number two.
Thanks. Yeah, a lot of the same things we're going to touch is on mistake two as well. So a lot of teams push back because they believe accessibility will, dilute the visual impact, break the brand rules, or limit creativity. But again, with that reframe, strong brands aren't fragile, they're flexible. I'm going to keep saying that. And accessibility, you know, the design for it doesn't weaken the brand, it strengthens it. So it improves clarity, consistency, and builds trust, which are the very things that brands are built on, right? So accessibility usually enters the conversation. I've been on a team, an internal team, and sometimes it comes through, legal or compliance. Someone says, we have to do this. And when accessibility shows up as a requirement instead of a design principle, it immediately feels like a threat. Will this limit my creativity? Will it break our brand? Will it force us to redesign everything? If accessibility feels like it weakens your brand, what is it actually exposing is the fragility of the system. So the good news is that we don't need to overhaul everything. You need clearer guardrails. So in those three places are color, typography, and tone of voice. For color, contrast issues are one of the fastest ways brands can be more accessible. Um, the fix isn't fewer colors, it's clearer rules. So one of the most practical things that you can do is create a color matrix like this on the screen. It shows which brand colors work together and which ones don't. This removes subjective decision making and speeds teams up. And if your matrix reveals that your palette doesn't offer enough accessible pairings, that's not a failure. Again, it's just that you have to evolve that palette. And so if you see on the screen, there's a QR code. This is a helpful tool, one of the many that you can find, but you can plug in your colors and it can build out what your matrix and how it works. Next is typography. And as a designer, I'll be honest, a beautiful font pairing is like with perfect kerning, that's like a gift. We all love it. And yes, there are moments when text as an image makes sense. If it has that strong contrast and a thoughtful alt text, we can preserve those brand moments. But the single biggest thing we can do to improve accessibility over and over for as long as I've worked in email is to use live HTML text wherever possible. Live text supports screen readers. It scales when someone zooms in. It adapts to dark mode, and it allows us to maintain minimum readable body size of 14 to 16 pixels. Live text preserves us to maintain the brand voice better than images ever could because it adapts, responds, and travels. And so again, don't dilute the trust. Using live HTML text protects that. And so when you can read, scan, and understand your content effortlessly, and the confidence in the brand goes up. The last topic is tone of voice. I love this sample. Have you lost my screen?
I think we're back.
Oh, okay.
We're back. Yeah.
Oh no. Let me
Yeah.
know if I should share. Okay. So within, can you see my screen though?
I can see it.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Thanks, Riley.
Yeah.
Uh, so with tone of voice, plain language, like Tyler said, it's plain language isn't boring. clarity supports that cognitive accessibility, where clear hierarchy and scannability improve performance for everyone. The tone of voice is where accessibility and personalization truly meet. So writing clearly isn't dumbing things down, it's meeting people where they are. And in this example, the brand voice shows up everywhere, even in the alt text. The logo isn't just McDonald's logo. If you dig a little deeper, you'll see that it's contextual and they went that extra level. And so it says, visit McDonald's, home of the Minecraft movie Happy Meal. That's accessible and it's branded. The primary message also follows that brand. So they bring in that Minecraft talk by bringing in words like spawning and dig. And all of this is put on, live text within a solid background. And they're not flattening anything into a hero image. And so the body copy walks the reader through the offer with three clear, scannable steps. Always breaking up things into scannable steps helps the reader get through it. And so with this, you can see what to order, what you get, what unlocks the game. This email feels organized and confident, and it's just readable for someone tabbing through the screen reader as it is for somebody screening on a cracked phone. And the CTA, just like Tyler said, you know exactly what will happen when you tap. And that's just not just WCAG friendly, that's just better marketing. And so stronger systems are what make personalization, scale, and performance possible. So Tyler, can you tell us about mistake three?
Yes. Let's see. Can we get to? Okay.
Is it
I'm,
just laggy?
am I controlling it now, maybe? Let's see. All right. We'll find out. Yes, thank you, Lauren. We'll get into mistake number three, and that's just the accessibility. It feels really overwhelming. Um, and it needs to be treated like a massive project. But in reality, most of all of those wins in accessibility come in small intentional decisions that we can just start making today. So accessibility doesn't require, perfection or even like a massive overhaul project. It just really grows through momentum. And momentum usually starts by focusing where you actually have influence, not where sort of you wish you did. So I think something that can be helpful is to sort of break up that influence in these couple of different ways. So we can first start to think about attitudes. And the great news is that you decided to come to this webinar and it's probably not your first one. So your attitudes about accessibility are probably pretty positive. So education and advocacy matter a whole lot. So, when people understand why accessibility matters, then inclusive decisions that you'll make, they will just get easier over time. The second is the environment. And, for this crowd, I would say, that's the inbox. That is the environment that we can control for the most part. So when we start with the inbox, we can, again, just have those small intentional decisions that we can take with each send. And then we can just, improve accessibility for, our users. And the third one is institutions. That one's a little bit more complicated, as you can imagine. To affect an entire company is a lot of work. But if you can do that, that is where change is really going to scale. But for most of us, it's like grassroots progress. And we're starting locally. But once our team starts talking about it and starts implementing it, then we can see other teams start to do it as well. And then this can really change how an organization works. In most companies, accessibility momentum just it doesn't start with a mandate that comes from down high or whatever. It starts with just one person who wants to make things better for a large group of people. And then once that person talks about it, the other people will start talking about it, and it just grows and grows and grows. So we'll go on to the next slide.
Does it move in?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. So if accessibility grows through momentum, I guess the next question is, well, where does that momentum actually come from? And how can we think about roles and responsibilities like within a team? All of this on your shoulders can be quite heavy. So, we can look for, other people to help within your department. But when we think about visual designers, we think about, fixing those fundamentals. So that's setting readable base sizes for all of your fonts. It's using real heading styles. It's avoiding all caps and sentences. All of these things can dramatically improve readability and scannability. And like Lauren said, none of this is going to really change your design system at all. When we think about copywriters, we think about accessibility showing up in partnership. So, I pair with copywriters to write alt text a lot of times, just because, designers really understand the intention behind why the images are used within an email. So I really think that they need to be at the forefront of setting those like, well, why did I use this image? Why is it important? Give it some context. And then, your copywriters are going to help with your grammar and make sure that everything sounds just right. They're also going to continue to use plain structured language, advocating. This is another thing I like to always tell them to do. While this is a little outside the world of email, but I always like them to be advocating for captions and transcripts when it comes to video media. I think that really helps with any future resources that we want to use. But ways to put that text on screen is really helpful for our users that aren't using Sight to experience things. It's always nice for them to be in the pocket for that. We've got our developers. Small technical decisions really matter. Things like adding language tags, coding in a logical reading order, live text whenever possible, those bulletproof buttons, all that good stuff. Also making sure that an email can be accessed through a keyboard. That's going to really help all of our people who are accessing our experience with assistive technologies. And for managers, this is about creating the really good conditions that progress can happen. So encourage testing, iterations, normalizing accessibility, in reviews, and knowing also sort of what question should I be asking to which people, just so that you can become part of how the work actually gets done. And I want to add there's one other thing that matters across all roles, and that is feedback.
Mm.
So when we think about critiques, confusion isn't a preference. These are data points. So when someone struggles to read or understand something, they are communicating a barrier to you. And so I would definitely be sure to like listen whenever you hear those kinds of things in your critiques or feedback. If someone is having a hard time, that is something that definitely should be addressed. um yeah, so we can close off this section on the next slide. What I'll say here is just like better accessibility doesn't come from really big launches or perfect roadmaps. It grows through consistent, thoughtful decisions. So learn the standards and then just keep repeating them, send after send after send. And with that mindset in place, I think it's time for us to maybe show a couple of examples of how some small changes made a big difference. So yeah, so Lauren and I we were very lucky to receive two emails, and we were asked to just give our opinions about how we felt these emails were progressing on their sort of accessibility journey. And so yeah, so I can start with the first one. I'm going to move on to the next slide. So yeah. So here, I want to say that this is a really strong email. It shows real progress towards accessibility, which makes it a really great example to learn from. what's going right here? There's great use of typographical hierarchy and structure. There's clear dual indicators to clickable elements, such as anytime that you use color, shape, maybe a text style, just something to, there needs to be just two ways to indicate that something is clickable. There's thoughtful left-aligned longer bits of copy, and there's good color contrast with the copy and background throughout. A couple of opportunities that I see here, they're small, but they could be meaningful. I would recommend adding alt text to all of the images in this email to help that experience. Um, I would also recommend reducing the amount of repetitive CTA labels. So if we take a look, there's a lot of view deals or read more, view deals, read more, read. So it's really good just to go ahead and vary those up so that you don't have the same, the thing, they shouldn't say the same every time. Also, adding a language tag within your code is going to help the screen reader know what language to read this live text in. And lastly, I would work to maybe remove some of that language about viewing or reading, just because there are going to be a lot of people who don't experience the content that way. So again, just in the spirit of telling people more about what is the value behind the click, I would recommend, looking at different ways that you could write out those calls to actions. None of these are rebuilds. This is all really good stuff, and these are just some minor refinements. And I think this is what accessibility, progress actually looks like. It's got a strong foundation, thoughtful decisions, and then there's just small adjustments that you make along the way, and then they compound, and you have a really great email at the end of it. Lauren, I will send it on over to you
Great.
for your example.
All right. So I think you could see it. I'm getting it really quick on my side, but we'll make sure that
I can see
all
it.
right, great.
Yeah.
All right. So this is one of those emails that I'm actually a Royal Caribbean cruise use vacationer. So my family has gone on these trips, and I've actually gotten this email in my inbox. And I want to say this email is personalized to the T. It knows my ship, my dates, and where I'll be each day, and what's already booked, and what I might want to explore. And I loved getting this because sometimes when you're in the app, it's just like overwhelming. And so it's nice to have this as a communication outside of the app, and then you're really starting to plan your days. And so with only a couple minutes left, I just want to make sure that we're running through some of the strengths and opportunities. And from an accessibility standpoint, there's a lot working well, and because right away the hierarchy is clear. Most of the content is live text. Um, in that header area is where we kind of struggle a little bit with, like, okay, there's a background image, but that's an image that uses the headline, which alt text is great. But if that icon on the C's, that's my trip, that's live text. So we have to be careful with using background images on live text just with conversions of dark mode. So maybe considering using like a color bleeding into the image, or transparent pings are my best friend in email when I have to use them to make it feel seamless, right? And so, it's not really about changing, it's just adjusting small refinement. And then, really strong live text, like we mentioned. But that first paragraph, I would left align it. It's a lot of text. It's great that you can call out my name, even though I'm not Barbara, but you know what I mean. But it sets it up. It sets up that structure with the itinerary below. And the CTAs are another opportunity where we're seeing that value. Reserve now works visually, but you can add more context to help that screen reader understand what they're booking. Adding either, changing it into a text link versus a button if it's too long. That's always helpful because you have that nice bold color. And finally, decorative icons. I would just keep them as, marked as decorative alt text. So you don't need to explain ship icon. You could just it could pass over it in using those tools, the screen reader tools, so you don't have to cog up the wheel in that way. But otherwise, I think the takeaway is that accessibility here is not a redesign as well. It's just this is a very personalized experience, and just small updates will just make it work better for more guests. All right. Thank you for meeting us today, and we are out of time.
Yes. Well, again, thank you all so much for coming to this event. Thank you, Litmus, for inviting me back, as well as Lauren.
Yes.
It's so nice to be around other like-minded email geeks.
Yes. High five.
Yes.